a youth organizer at Fierce, and I'm also one of the coaches of the New York City Youth Advisory Board. And thank you guys for coming out to hearing about our
Shout it out.
Okay, so thank you for joining us this afternoon to witness the pleas of those of us young people who know what it is like to be in need of safe shelter, of the people who offer services to our community as we implore the city of New York to center its vulnerable citizens.
Right. We are outside on the steps of City Hall to urge Mayor de Blasio, the Department of Youth and Community Development, DYCD, and the City Council to extend the age that homeless youth can receive housing as residential programs for homeless youth funded by DYCD until the age of 25 years.
Earlier this year, many of us stood on these very steps on a national day of awareness for the issues of youth homelessness, and we asked the same of the city, and yet here we are again, as if the urgency of our needs can wait months and years. New York State has recently enacted legislation to extend the age in NYS licensed homeless youth housing programs until the age of 25. So now, we look to the city and DYCD to follow suit.
Our demand is that the New York City's Department of Youth and Community Development adopts the new state legislation and allow 21 to 24-year-old youth to access youth shelters. We acknowledge that the de Blasio administration has done great work expanding the number of youth shelter beds and working to improve the DHS system for LGBTQ, gender non-conforming, and non-binary folks. However, the reality is that youth require a great number of services and degree of consideration that is available in youth adult shelters. That's not available currently right now.
It is imperative that we are heard here today because our lives and the quality of our lives depend upon it. We have several speakers here today to share from lived experience from working with impacted communities and for caring about our lives.
You can add more if you want to. You can talk about your own analysis, like why should DYCD house people who are under the age of 20, over the age of 21?
So the reason why it is that I'm doing this specifically is because I was a homeless youth of the Alley 40 Center before the age of 21. And basically what happens, if most people don't know what it is that when you become 21 years old, you're basically kicked out. Regardless of whether you have somewhere to go or not, you cannot stay within a DYCD shelter bed because you turned the age of 21. So ageism has been for a long time like a #1 issue that continually perpetuates homelessness. And I feel as though regardless of you being 21 or under 21, one homeless youth is far too many homeless youth, and that is why I'm out here with my other persons of lived experiences to talk about why it is that we need beds and services for youth 21 to 24 years.
Housing for the 40%, we won't stop until they have beds.
Do you want to help us with that, Jawanza?
Sure.
Yes. That would help.
So, 40% of all runaway and homeless youth identify as LGBTQ youth. So that's a disproportionate impact among queer youth who are experiencing homelessness. So we had a chant last time, and how does it go? Housing for the 40%, we won't stop till they get beds.
Housing for the 40%, we won't stop till they get beds. Housing for the 40%,
We won't stop till they get beds.
housing for the 40%,
We won't stop till they get beds.
housing for the 40%,
We won't stop till they get beds.
housing for the 40%,
We won't stop till they get beds.
housing for the 40%,
We won't stop till they get beds.
housing for the 40%,
We won't stop till they get beds.
housing for the 40%, we won't stop till they get beds. Housing for the 40%, we won't stop till they get beds.
Woo!
Alright, so the next speaker is a very good man that I've known for the last 2 years who has helped my experience at Alley 40 Center to be a great experience among other staff that work there, like Nadia and Cole, Gianni, and other few people. So I'm going to call up Cox Siliano, who is the CEO and the founder of Alley 40 Center.
great honor to be introduced by such wonderful young people as Sky and Lala. I'm beyond proud of them. So here we are in 2017. 20 years ago, Kiki Freeman and Ali Fournay were murdered on the streets of New York City. Kiki Freeman was 24 years old, Ali Fournay was 22 years old. I know so many young people over the years that have been murdered on the streets of New York City because they could not have access to safe shelter. So many queer youth, especially so many transgender youth, who are terrified of being warehoused in the adult shelter system and of facing violence, harassment, and oppression, homophobia, and transphobia. In those 20 years, there has been a movement of understanding that people don't stop being young the day they turn 21. There's been a movement of understanding that people need support as young people, at least until they're 24. The federal government has changed its definition of youth homelessness through HUD, considering it something that goes on until the day you turn 25. The state has now passed legislation changing the definition of youth homelessness until the day you turn 25. How on earth can New York City, the progressive capital of the world, the birthplace of the LGBT rights movement, be lagging behind Donald Trump's federal government? How can that be? But more than that, how in a city with a budget of billions of dollars have we not figured out a way through our public policy to make sure that LGBT youth can have safe places to sleep at night? Over the years, I've known so many young people who have suffered so badly, who have been hurt, humiliated, degraded, and murdered, sleeping in the streets because they didn't have access to safe shelter. I've known young people who've slept on rooftops, in abandoned buildings, in parks, under bridges. I know somebody who used to sleep in a public pay toilet because he was afraid to go to the adult shelter system. Hundreds of kids have talked to me about how terrifying it is to sleep in the subways at night because you're too afraid to go to the shelters. It's a disgrace. It's unacceptable. It's inhumane. A city with as strong and as powerful an LGBT community as New York City cannot abide by allowing hundreds of LGBT young people to be forced to sleep in the streets. So we're coming together to demand that DYCD follow the state policy and expand its youth shelter beds through the age of 24. And we acknowledge the wonderfulness of the fact that the state has changed the law, but the state hasn't put any dollars to make this happen. This has to be fair. So we're also calling on the state to pony up dollars to make their law a viable reality. But what's most important of all is that we have to acknowledge that these young people are in danger, they're suffering, and it's wrong, and it's a disgrace for us as a city to allow this to happen any longer. So I'm going to ask for a chant right now, and I want it to be really loud. Raise the age now!
Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age now! Raise the age
by saying thank you to everyone for coming out and continually fighting for something so important and needed for young folks in our city. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name's Travi, I'm 21, and currently I'm a homeless young person. Throughout my journey as a young homeless person, I've had to fear a lot of things, but I feel like my biggest fear has always been turning 21 and still being homeless. I'm not sure if it was the total fear setting in of where I'll go, or if it was having the fear of having almost little to no resources available to myself to get on my feet. When I was 19, I was fully informed about how turning 21 and being homeless felt like the end of the road if you didn't have your whole plan set out and in action. Aging out of youth shelters and being forced into adult shelters because there is nowhere else for you to go is completely horrifying. Going into adult shelters as a young person, let alone someone who identifies as LGBTQ, it's almost like having a target on your back for people to mess with you and try to hurt you. I was lucky enough that I got into a youth shelter that is able to house me and offer me services after 21, which is the Alley 40 Center. But that isn't the case for many other young folks in New York City. Mayor de Blasio, Commissioner Bill Chong of DYCD need to adopt the amendment to the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act because, as dramatic as it sounds, it can save so many lives. Countless youth go every night not knowing where they will lay their heads or if they will constantly have to be looking over their shoulders at night. If you want to end homelessness, if you want to give all of us a chance at becoming greater than the struggle we have to face in our lives, adopt the amendment. Give us a chance to reach the goals that you guys want us to reach. How can someone focus on school or work if right after their shift ends or their classes end, you have to worry about will you have somewhere to go, will you have somewhere to sleep tonight? It's illogical to think a 21-year-old should have their entire lives planned out and in processing without some form of guidance. For the sake of myself and all the other young folks I know who are currently going through this situation and the young folks I don't know, and for the countless young folks who will go through this struggle in the future to come, adopt the amendment. Don't let us down like many others have before. Be the change that saves our lives. Lives that so many don't care enough to fight for.
Thank you so very much, Darby. Alright, the next speaker is a very admirable man who's been working with us over the last 2 years, at least since I've been involved in this work, and that's Councilmember Richie Torres.
I'll be brief, but my message is simple. Housing is health. We know that if we raise the age, if we allow everyone access to stable shelter, we can have a real impact in driving down HIV transmission, sexually transmitted diseases in the city of New York. Because as far as I'm concerned, if you have now access to stable shelter, you have no means of rebuilding your life. You have no means of achieving your version of the American dream. When you're homeless, you're more susceptible to substance abuse and mental illness and contact with the criminal justice system. It's hardly a coincidence that LGBTQ youth, who have the highest rates of homelessness, also face the highest rates of suicide. And so raising the age is not simply a housing policy, it's a matter of life and death, it's a matter of public health. We will have an impact in saving lives. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to say a little letter. This is the DYCD Trippin letter I wrote to Mayor de Blasio, the City Council, and also DYCD Commissioner, Mr. Chong. So, as you know, my name is Latifah Blades. I am currently a resident of a HUD housing transitional living program. I'm also 21 years of age. I will be turning 22 in October. I am calling on DYCD to raise the age so that youths between the ages of 21 through 24 can access youth housing, emergency and transitional living programs. To me, this would help a lot of my peers. I would not have to worry about where they would have to lay their head next or how they'll fend for themselves. Youths 21 to 24 have the same needs as much as an individual that's under 21. Since I have been in 21 plus housing, I've made much more progress in group independently. Working and knowing I have somewhere to lay my head is what makes life easy. So, the next individual that I will be presenting is Amanda Moore from Black Lives Matter of Greater New York.
became homeless. And I was living on the streets until about June when I moved into the LA Center. Today is the day before my 21st birthday. I got kicked out of my shelter because I turned 21 tomorrow. I have no idea where I'm going to sleep, and that's a problem. Like, me turning 21 does not give me a big bucket of cash. It doesn't, I don't get a prize for turning 21, but now I get kicked out of my shelter with possibly nowhere to stay for weeks, months even, because of waiting lists for the adult shelters. This has got to stop. Like you said, pretty much it's like a horrifying thing. Since the moment I realized that I was gonna get kicked out at 21, I was horrified. And with everything that's going on in this country and how much hate is going on, we cannot have our youth out here, especially not queer youth. Because if everybody remembers Charlottesville, the KKK doesn't like black people, I mean not black people, queer people either. And they even made a call out to attack us. So the fact that they're pretty much just throwing us to them is like throwing us out to the dogs, throwing us out to the wolves. And I feel like that needs to change. Point blank period.
Alright, thank you so very much, Amanda. Alright, I'm gonna bring up Patrick George from GMAC.
Shout it out.
Yeah. So, first off, I just want to thank everybody for being here, the organizations, the news media. Thank you all for being here and listening to our message and understanding the importance of our message. So, I am Patrick George III. As you know, I'm a graduate student at Hunter College. I'm also an intern at GMHC. I'm here to share my experience of being when I was homeless. I am a homeless queer youth of color myself. I first experienced homelessness when I was 14. My mom, she's very much against, she's very much about specific gender roles and very much against various sexual orientation. So I was kicked out of my house when I was 14, various times, between 14 and 17, until I was eventually finally kicked out at the age of 17, and I had to couch surf for a couple of months until I was able to find my way to family members in New York City. In the space between me finding my way to family members, I was living on this guy's couch, who I thought was a friend of mine, but come to find out he was really just sort of trying to, he was a predator. He was looking for ways to get to me sexually. So, which is something that many homeless youth have to deal with, dealing with survival sex and predatory individuals when they're going through homelessness. So finally I was able to make it to New York City, and from that point on I was in a safe and comfortable environment, and through that safe space I was able to become a college graduate. I've graduated from BMCC with an associate's degree. I have a psychology and a sociology degree from Hunter College. And with me saying all of this, it just goes to show how youth can thrive when they're given adequate shelter. We know that when youth don't have a safe space to be in, that their chances of exiting homelessness are diminished. Their chances of having a successful full life are diminished. So standing here as living proof of how shelter can help young people of color, I just want to say that we here and all these organizations here are calling on DYCD to raise the age, because we know that sexual minorities, especially queer people of color, are more susceptible to contracting sexually transmitted illnesses, are more susceptible to substance abuse. We also know they're more susceptible to violence, whether that's physical or whether that's physical violence or sexual violence. So again, we would just like to say to DYCD and to the mayor and to our city officials that it's very important for you to raise the age from 21 to 25 to give youth, especially queer youth of color, an adequate chance that they need to be successful adults. Thank you very much.
Before we have our next speaker, I want to ask people, why are we here? Again.
To raise the age.
Raise the age. And who has the power to raise the age?
DYCD.
DYCD. Does anybody know where DYCD's office is?
Yes, we do. It's 2 Lafayette.
2 Lafayette. 2 blocks away.
It's only 2 blocks away.
And guess where we're going?
We're going to go there. We're going to march there and finish our speak out outside of DYCD. We called them and said, come downstairs. Come talk to us. Come look us in the face and say, you're not going to extend the age. Yeah? Yeah! And we have a list of speakers, a few more, so just come with us and they're going to finish. Our next speakers from the Youth Advisory Board. So please, come with. Yeah? Let's get this banner in front. Jason, I don't know which way to go.
Okay, cool. So folks, with the plan? Cool. So we're going to march, uniform, signs, and banners in front of DYCD, finish the speak out, and see if someone from the commissioner's office can talk with us.